Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had always known she was different from other naval officers. At 28, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that made some people uncomfortable. Her compact frame and unassuming appearance often led others to underestimate her, which had become both a blessing and a curse throughout her military career. The morning started like any other aboard the USS Hampton, a nuclear submarine stationed in the Pacific. Sarah was reviewing navigation charts in the control room when Captain Robert Hayes stormed in, his face red with anger. The tension in the room immediately shifted as crew members glanced nervously between their instruments and the unfolding scene. "Mitchell!" Captain Hayes barked, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "What the hell do you think you're doing questioning my orders in front of the crew?" Sarah looked up calmly from her charts, meeting his gaze without flinching. The previous day, she had respectfully voiced concerns about a tactical maneuver during a routine drill. The captain had ordered the submarine to surface in potentially hostile waters without proper reconnaissance, and Sarah had quietly suggested alternative approaches that would ensure crew safety. "Sir, I was simply offering tactical alternatives based on my assessment of the situation," Sarah replied evenly, her voice steady despite the captain's aggressive tone. Captain Hayes stepped closer, invading her personal space in an obvious attempt to intimidate her. At 6 feet tall, he towered over Sarah's 5'4" frame. Several crew members had stopped their work entirely, watching the confrontation unfold with growing discomfort. "Listen here, Lieutenant," Hayes sneered, pointing a finger inches from her face. "I don't care what fancy training you think you have or what kind of special treatment you got to earn those bars. On this submarine, I'm the only one who makes tactical decisions. You're nothing more than a glorified navigator, and if you can't remember your place, I'll make sure you're transferred to the most remote assignment I can find." The control room fell completely silent. Sarah could feel the eyes of 20 crew members on her, waiting to see how she would respond to this public humiliation. Some looked sympathetic, others appeared curious about whether she would fight back or simply accept the captain's verbal assault. What Captain Hayes didn't know was that Sarah Mitchell wasn't just any naval officer. Her personnel file, classified at the highest levels, contained information that would have changed his entire approach to this confrontation. Sarah was a graduate of basic underwater demolition/SEAL training, one of only a handful of women to successfully complete the grueling program. She had spent the last 5 years operating in some of the world's most dangerous locations, conducting covert missions that most military personnel couldn't even imagine. Her current assignment aboard the submarine was actually a cover for a classified operation. The Navy had placed her there to gather intelligence on potential security vulnerabilities in the submarine fleet, particularly regarding command decisions that could compromise mission success or crew safety. Captain Hayes' reckless tactical choices had already caught the attention of naval intelligence. Sarah took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. She had learned early in her SEAL training that the most powerful response often came not from immediate retaliation, but from strategic patience. Her instructors had taught her to read people, to understand their weaknesses, and to choose the perfect moment to reveal her true capabilities. "I understand, Captain," Sarah said quietly, maintaining eye contact. "I'll be sure to remember that." Captain Hayes seemed satisfied with what he interpreted as submission. He straightened his uniform jacket and addressed the control room crew. "That goes for all of you. Chain of command exists for a reason, and I won't tolerate any more insubordination." As the captain left the control room, Sarah returned to her navigation charts. But her mind was already working through the implications of this confrontation. She had documented 3 previous instances where Captain Hayes had made decisions that violated standard safety protocols. His pattern of intimidation and his apparent disregard for crew welfare were exactly the kind of leadership failures her mission was designed to identify. Petty Officer Martinez, who had witnessed the entire exchange, approached Sarah's station once the captain was gone. "Ma'am, that wasn't right," he whispered. "The captain's been getting worse lately. Some of us have been talking, and we're worried about his judgment calls." Sarah nodded thoughtfully but said nothing. She had learned that gathering intelligence required patience and careful observation. The crew's growing concerns about their captain's leadership would be valuable information for her eventual report, but she needed to be cautious about how she collected that information. Over the next few days, Captain Hayes seemed determined to make Sarah's life as difficult as possible. He assigned her to extra duties, excluded her from important briefings, and made snide comments about her qualifications whenever other officers were present. Each incident was carefully calculated to undermine her authority and make her question her place aboard the submarine. What the captain failed to realize was that his behavior was providing Sarah with exactly the kind of evidence she needed for her classified mission. Every act of intimidation, every breach of protocol, and every poor tactical decision was being meticulously documented in her encrypted reports to naval intelligence. The breaking point came during a combat readiness drill. Captain Hayes ordered the submarine to execute a maneuver that would have exposed them to enemy detection in a real-world scenario. When Sarah quietly suggested modifications to improve their defensive position, the captain exploded. "That's it, Mitchell," he shouted in front of the entire crew. "I'm sick of your constant questioning of my authority. You think you know better than an officer with 15 years of command experience? You're nothing but a desk jockey who got lucky enough to serve on a real submarine." This time, Sarah's response was different. She stood up slowly, her posture shifting subtly from that of a compliant officer to something altogether more dangerous. The crew sensed the change immediately, though they couldn't quite identify what was different about Lieutenant Mitchell. "Captain," Sarah said, her voice carrying a new edge that made several crew members look up from their stations. "I think there might be some things about my background that weren't included in your briefing materials." Captain Hayes laughed dismissively, but something in Sarah's tone made him hesitate. For the first time since their confrontations began, he noticed the way she carried herself, the calculating look in her eyes, and the subtle confidence that seemed to radiate from her small frame. "Your background," he scoffed, though his voice carried less conviction than before. "What could possibly be in your background that would give you the authority to question my commands?" Sarah smiled for the first time since their confrontations began. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of expression that her SEAL teammates would have recognized immediately, the look of someone who had been holding back and was finally ready to show their true capabilities. The control room atmosphere became electric with tension as crew members sensed that something significant was about to happen. Sarah reached for her secure communication device, the kind that only special operations personnel carried, and, for the first time, Captain Hayes noticed that her equipment wasn't standard issue for submarine navigation officers. Sarah's fingers moved across the secure communication device with practiced efficiency, entering authorization codes that only a select few military personnel possessed. The device's screen flickered to life, displaying classified clearance levels that made Captain Hayes' eyes widen with sudden understanding. "What I'm about to show you, Captain, requires an immediate shift in our conversation," Sarah said, her voice now carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to life-or-death command decisions. "My actual orders aboard this submarine come directly from Naval Special Warfare Command." She turned the device toward Captain Hayes, revealing classified documentation that outlined her true mission. The captain's face went pale as he read the security clearances and operational directives that placed Sarah far above his own authorization level. The document clearly identified her as Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, Navy SEAL, assigned to conduct classified assessments of submarine command effectiveness. "This is impossible," Captain Hayes stammered, backing away from the device as if it might explode. "Women aren't allowed in SEAL units. This has to be some kind of mistake or fabrication." Sarah's expression remained completely professional, but there was steel in her voice when she responded. "Captain, I graduated from basic underwater demolition/SEAL training 3 years ago as part of a classified integration program. My class included 4 women, and I was one of 2 who completed the full program. For the past 18 months, I've been conducting deep cover operations in submarine fleets across 3 different commands." The control room crew had stopped all pretense of working and were openly staring at the unfolding revelation. Petty Officer Martinez looked like he was witnessing something from a movie, while Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez slowly shook his head in amazement. Sarah continued, her tone becoming more serious. "My mission parameters include evaluating command decisions that could compromise crew safety or mission effectiveness. Over the past 2 weeks, I've documented 17 separate instances where your tactical choices violated standard operating procedures and placed the submarine and its crew at unnecessary risk." Captain Hayes' face had progressed from pale to ashen. The implications of Sarah's revelation were becoming clear to him. If a Navy SEAL had been placed aboard his submarine to evaluate his command performance, it meant that higher authorities already had concerns about his leadership. The surface maneuver you ordered 3 days ago in Sector 7? Sarah continued relentlessly. That would have exposed us to enemy sonar detection for 47 minutes longer than necessary. The navigation route you selected yesterday cut through a known area of enemy submarine activity without implementing proper stealth protocols. Each of these decisions put 36 crew members at risk. She pulled up additional files on her device, showing detailed tactical analyses that she had been compiling since her arrival. The documentation was thorough, professional, and damning. Every poor decision, every breach of protocol, and every instance of intimidating behavior had been recorded with the precision of someone trained in military intelligence gathering. My preliminary assessment, Sarah said, her voice now carrying the authority of someone who had operated in combat zones that Captain Hayes could only imagine, indicates serious deficiencies in tactical judgment, crew safety protocols, and leadership effectiveness. The captain tried to regain some composure, straightening his uniform and attempting to reassert his authority. Even if what you're saying is true, I'm still the commanding officer of this vessel. You can't just actually, Captain, Sarah interrupted, touching another section of her device. My operational authority in matters of crew safety supersedes local command structure when evidence of negligent leadership is documented. I've been authorized to implement immediate tactical corrections and, if necessary, recommend emergency command changes. This revelation hit Captain Hayes like a physical blow. Not only had he been intimidating and belittling a Navy SEAL for the past 2 weeks, but he had been doing so in front of the very crew members whose safety she was assigned to protect. His attempts to humiliate her had actually been providing her with evidence of his unfitness for command. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression showing a mixture of respect and curiosity. Ma'am, if I may ask, what kind of operations have you been involved in before this assignment? Sarah glanced at Captain Hayes before answering, making it clear that the power dynamic in the control room had permanently shifted. I can share some general information, Chief. Over the past 3 years, I've conducted underwater infiltration missions in hostile territories, participated in deep-sea rescue operations under extreme conditions, and completed advanced combat diving courses that most military personnel don't even know exist. She paused, letting the information sink in before continuing. I've spent 18 months living underwater in conditions that would challenge most experienced submariners. I've completed survival training in Arctic waters, operated specialized equipment in zero-visibility conditions, and maintained operational effectiveness during combat scenarios that most people would consider impossible. Petty Officer Martinez raised his hand tentatively. Ma'am, when you questioned the captain's tactical decisions, you weren't just offering suggestions, were you? No, Martinez, Sarah replied with a slight smile. I was trying to prevent potentially fatal mistakes using knowledge gained from actual combat experience. When I suggested alternative approaches to submarine positioning, I was drawing on training that included live-fire exercises with enemy vessels. Captain Hayes finally found his voice again, though it was considerably weaker than before. Why wasn't I informed about your background? This seems like information that a commanding officer should have. Sarah's expression became serious again. Because, Captain, the effectiveness of my evaluation depends on observing natural command behaviors. If you had known I was conducting an assessment, you might have modified your leadership style temporarily. My orders required me to evaluate your authentic command decisions under normal operating conditions. The implications of this statement were staggering for Captain Hayes. Everything he had done over the past 2 weeks, every intimidating comment, every attempt to undermine Sarah's authority, every tactical shortcut that prioritized his ego over crew safety, had been observed and documented by one of the Navy's most elite operatives. The personal threats you made regarding my career assignments? Sarah continued, accessing another file on her device. Those have been recorded and will be included in my report as evidence of retaliatory behavior toward subordinate personnel. She looked around the control room, making eye contact with several crew members who had witnessed the captain's intimidation tactics. The pattern of behavior I've observed doesn't just affect me. Several crew members have expressed concerns about tactical decisions that seem to prioritize command authority over mission effectiveness and crew safety. Captain Hayes realized that his entire naval career was potentially in jeopardy. Years of service, his command position, and his future prospects were all hanging in the balance based on the assessment of someone he had been treating as an inferior officer for 2 weeks. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, his voice now showing the respect that should have been there from the beginning, "I think we need to discuss this situation privately." Sarah shook her head. "Actually, Captain, my protocols require that all interactions regarding this assessment be conducted with witness personnel present. Transparency is essential for the integrity of the evaluation process." The control room crew was witnessing something unprecedented, their commanding officer being held accountable by someone with the authority and expertise to do so effectively. For many of them, it was the first time they had seen military accountability systems working as they were designed to work. The secure communication device in Sarah's hands chirped softly, indicating an incoming priority message from Naval Special Warfare Command. As she read the encrypted communication, her expression became grave, and the control room atmosphere shifted once again. "Captain Hayes," Sarah said, looking up from the device, "I've just received new orders that change the nature of this situation significantly." Captain Hayes had spent the last hour coming to terms with the reality that his career was likely over, but something in Sarah's tone suggested that bigger issues were at play. "What kind of orders?" "Intelligence indicates that this submarine may be targeted for infiltration by hostile forces within the next 72 hours, Sarah replied, her SEAL training automatically shifting her into operational mode. "My cover assignment is being terminated, and I'm being activated for my primary mission parameters." She turned to address the entire control room crew. "What I'm about to tell you is classified, but, given the current threat level, you need to understand the situation. This submarine has been selected as a test case for a new type of underwater surveillance operation. Enemy agents have been attempting to place sleeper operatives aboard submarines to gather intelligence on our nuclear capabilities." The crew members exchanged nervous glances as they realized they were no longer dealing with a simple command evaluation. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. "Ma'am, are you saying we have enemy agents aboard this submarine?" "Not yet," Sarah replied, "but intelligence suggests an attempt will be made during our next port call. My real mission is to identify potential security vulnerabilities and implement countermeasures before hostile forces can exploit them." She looked directly at Captain Hayes. "Your command decisions over the past 2 weeks have created exactly the kind of security gaps that enemy operatives look for. A divided crew, questioning their leadership, creates opportunities for outside manipulation." Captain Hayes finally began to understand the full scope of what had been happening. "You mean my leadership failures weren't just putting the crew at risk from operational mistakes?" "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "A submarine crew that doesn't trust their commanding officer becomes vulnerable to outside influence. Enemy operatives specifically target vessels where crew morale is low and command authority is questioned. Your intimidation tactics and poor tactical decisions created a perfect environment for potential infiltration." She activated her device again, bringing up intelligence reports that painted a disturbing picture of enemy operations targeting submarine fleets. Over the past 18 months, 3 submarines have experienced security breaches that began with exactly this pattern: ineffective command leadership creating crew dissatisfaction, followed by seemingly helpful outside personnel offering alternative leadership or support. Petty Officer Martinez raised his hand. "Ma'am, does this mean the captain was set up somehow?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Not intentionally, Martinez. But enemy intelligence services study our personnel files, looking for officers with patterns of behavior that create vulnerability. Captain Hayes' previous command evaluations indicated potential problems with crew relations and tactical judgment. This revelation created a complex situation for everyone in the control room. Captain Hayes was clearly unfit for command based on his recent behavior, but he was also potentially a victim of enemy intelligence operations that had identified him as a weak point in submarine security. What happens now? Captain Hayes asked, his voice showing a mixture of resignation and concern for his crew. Sarah's expression became completely professional as she shifted into her operational role. Now, Captain, we implement emergency security protocols. My authority under these circumstances includes temporary command modification if necessary to protect the submarine and its crew. She turned to address the entire crew. Over the next 72 hours, this submarine will operate under enhanced security measures. All personnel movements will be monitored, all external communications will be screened, and any unusual behavior will be investigated immediately. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez stepped forward again. Lieutenant, what do you need from us? I need you to understand that everything we've discussed today demonstrates exactly why security protocols exist, Sarah replied. A submarine crew must function as a unified team under competent leadership. When that breaks down, everyone becomes vulnerable. She looked back at Captain Hayes. Captain, your personal intimidation of crew members, your disregard for established safety protocols, and your attempts to undermine qualified personnel created exactly the kind of environment that enemy operatives exploit. Whether you intended it or not, your behavior was compromising the security of this vessel. Captain Hayes nodded slowly, the full weight of his failures finally becoming clear. Lieutenant Mitchell, what do you recommend? I recommend that you focus on learning why effective military leadership matters, Sarah replied. This isn't just about following orders or maintaining authority. It's about creating an environment where 36 highly trained personnel can function effectively under extreme conditions. She addressed the crew again. For those of you who witnessed the confrontations between the captain and me over the past 2 weeks, you now understand why I couldn't simply ignore his tactical mistakes or accept his attempts at intimidation. I wasn't just defending myself, I was protecting all of you from the consequences of ineffective leadership. The control room crew was beginning to understand that they had witnessed something much more significant than a personality conflict between officers. They had seen a real-time demonstration of how command failures create security vulnerabilities, and how proper military accountability systems are designed to protect everyone in the unit. Petty Officer Martinez spoke up again. Ma'am, when you question the captain's orders, you are actually doing your job as a SEAL, not just as a navigation officer. That's correct, Martinez, Sarah confirmed. Navy SEALs are trained to identify and address threats to mission success and personnel safety, regardless of where those threats originate. Sometimes the biggest threat to a military unit comes from within, in the form of ineffective or dangerous leadership. She pulled up a final file on her device, showing the comprehensive assessment she had compiled over her 2 weeks aboard the submarine. My report will recommend immediate command review for Captain Hayes, enhanced security training for the entire crew, and implementation of new protocols designed to prevent the kind of security vulnerabilities we've identified. Captain Hayes finally spoke with genuine humility. Lieutenant, I owe you and this entire crew an apology. My behavior has been unacceptable, and I clearly didn't understand the broader implications of my actions. Sarah nodded acknowledgement but maintained her professional demeanor. Captain, the most important thing now is ensuring that this submarine and its crew can operate effectively and safely. Personal accountability is important, but protecting the mission and the personnel comes first. Over the following days, the submarine operated under Sarah's enhanced security protocols while awaiting orders from Naval Command. The crew worked with a new sense of purpose, understanding that their individual actions contributed to the security and effectiveness of the entire unit. Captain Hayes used the time to study proper leadership protocols and tactical procedures, working with Sarah to understand how his decisions had created vulnerabilities. While his naval career would likely be significantly impacted by the assessment, he began to grasp the broader importance of effective military leadership. The threatened infiltration attempt never materialized, possibly because enhanced security measures made the submarine an unattractive target for enemy operatives. Sarah's mission was ultimately successful. She had identified security vulnerabilities, implemented countermeasures, and demonstrated why proper military leadership and accountability systems are essential for national defense. When the submarine returned to port, Sarah transferred to her next assignment, leaving behind a crew that had learned valuable lessons about leadership, security, and the importance of every individual's role in maintaining military effectiveness. Captain Hayes faced a command review that would determine his future in the Navy, but he also gained an understanding of leadership that he had never possessed before. The story became a case study in Navy leadership training programs, demonstrating how individual behavior impacts unit security and why accountability systems exist to protect both personnel and mission effectiveness. For Sarah, it was another successful operation in a career dedicated to protecting those who serve alongside her, regardless of rank or position.